Alright everyone, so today we will be doing the sixth chapter of O level in IGCSE Computer Science, which is Automated and Emerging Technologies. Alright, so let's begin with the first topic, which is automated systems, right? So you can actually guess what it is just by the name. So it is basically just a combination of software and hardware that is designed and programmed to work automatically, right? So anything that works without the need of human intervention, for example, once you've actually programmed and you've told the system what to do, it will keep on performing the task as long as it is getting sufficient data and power. All right. So if you've ever seen the factory of Tesla, right, or if you've seen maybe any other factory, right, there's a lot of factories these days that are automated, right? So they use robotic arms and they use trolleys, and they use a lot of robots and stuff like that they basically program, and they tell them what to do, and they keep on doing the task without the need of any human intervention, right? So obviously humans are still supervising all the stuff that is happening, so that even if robots make any mistake, or if they get broken or something like that, they can still intervene. However, they're actually performing the main task automatically. All right. So just an overview of what is actually happening over there is that there are sensors which are actually input devices, and they take readings from their surroundings and send this data to a microprocessor. All right. So we studied about microprocessors before as well, so you need to recall what we actually do with microprocessors, right? So we take this input and send it to microprocessor. Then if the data is analog, it will be converted into digital format using an analog to digital converter, and then the microprocessor will process the data and take the necessary action, right? So let's just take a simple example of a greenhouse. All right, so let's say suppose that it is getting a lot hotter than what the actual temperature should be, right? So when the microprocessor receives the temperature from a temperature sensor, it will see that it is actually much hotter in the greenhouse than a certain value that was already provided to the microprocessor, right? So then the microprocessor will compare the set value, the certain value that was already given, with the value that it is taking from the temperature sensor, right? And if the value from the temperature sensor is higher, it will open the windows or maybe turn on the fan or the air conditioning or anything like that, and it will bring down the temperature. And then it will maybe when it receives that if it receives data from the temperature sensor saying that the temperature has become lower than certain value, it will turn off the fans and all that kind of stuff, right? So that's basically just an example of an automated system. All right. So there are actually many different automated systems in our syllabus. Over here you can see that I have included some of them. So industry, transport, agriculture, weather, all of these are basically just the industries where automated systems are used, right? So I have actually just given you advantages and disadvantages that are common in all of these industries. All right. So they basically just want us to memorize all of the advantages and disadvantages for a given scenario, right? So that'll be a little bit difficult. Obviously, you can come up with some of them on the spot as well. That this is a very easy type of question. However, I have given you advantages and disadvantages that are common in all industries. All right. So let's just study the advantages first. First of all, what you need to know is that automated systems perform tasks faster and more consistently, right? So robots don't actually need to take a break as long as they're getting power, right? They can keep on performing their task again and again, right? As long as they're being maintained, they do not have to take breaks, unlike humans who need regular breaks and they need to eat food and stuff like that, right? Secondly, it will also reduce the chance of human error, right? So because robots are actually built with very high quality parts, and they are programmed to do very specific things, right? And they can just keep on doing that over and over again with the same way, in the same way, right? This will obviously reduce the chances of any type of error. However, humans are more likely compared to robots to perform errors, right? This is also one of the advantages. And another advantage is that even though it can be a little bit expensive to set up, right, which is actually a disadvantage, in the long run it is actually much more cost efficient. All right, so robots are actually becoming much more cost efficient. Their maintenance is getting less costly, and even their setup is becoming less costly over time as technology advances, right? So it is actually becoming a very good investment for businesses these days, and you can see that many of these businesses are actually switching over to robots and automated systems rather than just human labor, right? So these are just a few of these advantages. I recommend that you memorize at least 3 or 4 of them, right? And make sure that you, when you're attempting the question in the exam, you tailor it to the actual question. All right. So coming on to the disadvantages, you can see here that one of the disadvantages is that they can obviously be very expensive, right? Secondly, you can see that automation will lead to job losses, right? So in the news and maybe in a few online articles, you will see that there are a lot of job losses that are happening just because of machines and robots, right? So this is actually one of the disadvantages of automated systems. And then thirdly, automated systems still require regular maintenance, right? So as I told you before, that even though you have spent money to set them up, they will still require you to maintain them, right? Oiling the joints and stuff like that. And maybe if you want to make the robot perform another task, you will have to hire another specialist that will come and program the machine, right? So this is just a few of the disadvantages, and I recommend that you memorize at least 3 to 4 of them as well. All right. So moving on to the topic of robotics, right? So obviously, you may have already seen a few robots, right? Maybe you've seen that Tesla is actually developing a humanoid robot that is actually looking just like a human and performs tasks just like humans. And maybe you've seen a few other robots inside factories and stuff like that, right? So let's just study what kind of characteristics a machine is supposed to have to be called a robot. All right. So there are three main characteristics. You can see that the first one is called mechanical structure, then we have its electrical components, and then that it is supposed to be programmable. All right. So the first characteristic is mechanical structure. So these are basically just all of the physical components of the robot that allow it to interact with the environment. All right. So for example, if you're talking about a robotic arm, you can see that the arm segments, the joints, and the grippers, right? So all of the physical components that interact with the environment are basically just the mechanical structure that of a robot. All right. And then we have the electrical components, right? So these are the internals of a robot, right? So sensors, microprocessors, actuators, which are not exactly interacting with the physical environment, however they are still crucial to actually make a robot perform a specific task, right? So this is just the electrical system that powers the robot and enables it to sense its environments, right? So this is basically what is controlling the physical structure or the mechanical structure that we studied before. All right. So obviously this includes sensors, microprocessors, and actuators, as I've told you before. So if you're talking about an example of a robotic vacuum cleaner, right, the sensors, for example, an ultrasonic sensor is basically used to detect obstacles, right? The microprocessor will take that and will take that data and then process it, and then the actuators will adjust the movement accordingly. So this is basically just the explanation of electrical components inside a robot. And then lastly, a robot is supposed to be programmable. So if you're talking about a robot that is performing a specific task, right, and you want to perform another type of task, you will have to program it again, or maybe call in a software engineer who will program it, right? And that is basically just how a robot can be made to perform a variety of tasks. All right. So that is basically just the three characteristics of robots. Coming down to advantages and disadvantages that are common in all roles of robots. So over here you can see that there are multiple industries that robots are used in, right? So I have also just taken the advantages and disadvantages that are common in all of these, so that you don't have to memorize the advantages and disadvantages of separate industries. All right. So make sure that you, when you're attempting these kinds of questions, you tailor these advantages to that specific kind of industry. All right. So first of all, let's study the advantages of robots, right? So the advantages of robots include that they work faster and more consistently, right? And also that they can perform tasks with higher accuracy. And thirdly, robots can also take over dangerous tasks. All right. So if you've ever seen a bomb disposal squad, right, they usually have robots with a huge arm that is actually going towards a bomb, right? Rather than risking human lives, they actually just send that bomb disposal robot to disarm the bomb, right? So these are actually just one of the few advantages of robots, so that we can maybe prevent human lives from being taken, and we can actually perform tasks with higher accuracy, stuff like that. All right. So also I recommend that you memorize 3 to 4 advantages. All right, so coming down to the disadvantages. So over here you can see that one of the disadvantages, which is actually almost the same as automated systems, is that their cost of purchasing and installing is very high. And then secondly, they will also require regular maintenance. And third, these robots can also lead to job losses, right? So the disadvantages and advantages of robots are very similar to automated systems. However, you should make sure that when you're attempting a question in the exam, you read that question very carefully and write the advantages and disadvantages that suit that question. All right, so don't just write any of these disadvantages or advantages randomly. Make sure that you read the question carefully and attempt it very carefully as well. Anyways, coming down to our last topic, which is artificial intelligence, right? So this is also a very interesting and trending topic these days. So artificial intelligence is basically just the branch of computer science that is dealing with the simulation of intelligent human behavior, right? So humans basically have an intelligence which differentiates them from other species on the planet, right? So humans are by far more intelligent than all the other species, right? So simulating this type of intelligence in computers is what is actually the definition of artificial intelligence. All right. So AI also has 4 main characteristics, right? Robots had 3 characteristics. AI has 4 main characteristics, right? So the first characteristic of AI is the collection of data. All right. So if you've maybe ever heard about artificial intelligence, or maybe if you've heard about ChatGPT, right, you will study about it in an article maybe that they used a lot of data to actually train that model, right? So what this means is that they used a lot of data from many different sources, right? They gathered data from many different sources, and then they use that to train that model, right? They actually tell the model what to do with this certain kind of data, right? So for example, if they get data from healthcare department, right, they will actually tell that model that this is related to this type of industry, and you will extract the data from this using these kinds of methods. And basically just the collection of huge samples of data is one of the characteristics of artificial intelligence, right? So artificial intelligence is just trained using data. Secondly, rules for using data, right? So as I told you before, that once it has actually collected all that data, it will use algorithms to process and analyze the data, right? So obviously just raw data itself is not very useful, right? The machine will actually have to be told how to use this data and how to give output that is very useful to the user, right? So when we are actually using ChatGPT, we have access to a huge database, right? However, that database is just being used by ChatGPT itself, and then it is giving us the certain type of answer, right? So we have access to a lot of data, however we are getting only the answers from the specific kind of data that we actually require, right? The AI system will use logical rules to the will apply logical rules to the data to draw conclusions and make decisions, right? So it will see if so when we basically give a question to chat gpt, right, it will go through all of the data and it will see that which type of data or what data actually is relevant to the question that was asked, and then it will basically send that data to us and so on and so forth, right? Third, its ability to reason. So, first of all, AI systems can infer new information from the data they have using logical reasoning and pattern recognition. So, let's say suppose that we have given it a database, the AI, we have given it a database of multiple mathematical problems, right? So 1 plus 1 is 2, and then 1 plus 2 is 3, and then 1 plus 4 is 5, right? All of these kind of stuff. So even if it is not exactly told what plus is, right, it does not know how to perform addition, it will see that the data is actually just being added and is being given a certain type of answer, right? So next time when we write 1 plus 6, right, it will just compare that to a certain data that we've already provided before, and we'll see that this matches the same pattern as the data that I've been provided before, and it will give us the answer accordingly, right? So even if it does not actually know what addition is, it will still be able to give an answer based off of just patterns. So coming on to its ability to learn and adapt. So AI systems can learn from data through machine learning techniques, right? It can adapt to new information, and they can continuously improve by learning, right? So obviously, there are a lot of different changes that are happening to data all the time, right? So they can actually learn this. Like for example, if the AI is trained to be very friendly to users, right? And it will see that maybe the user says to, like, if I actually tell ChatGPT to not be so friendly to me, rather just be a little bit more formal, you will see that it will tailor the experience a little bit more, and it will be more formal from now on, right? So that's basically what we mean when we say that AI has the ability to learn and adapt, right? We can tell it to perform a certain type of task in a different way, and it will keep on doing that, right? So that is basically just the four characteristics of AI. Coming down to one of the applications of AI, which is expert systems, right? So expert systems are basically AI programs that simulate the decision making abilities of a human expert, all right? So if you've actually gone online, you will see that there are a few interfaces. Like I don't exactly have a few examples off the top of my head. However, there are a few examples online that are basically just doctors. However, they're basically AI systems. All right, so they act like doctors, and you can maybe pay a fee to use them. But when you give them symptoms, and when you tell the type of data that they need to know, they will actually be able to tell what kind of disease you have, and they will be able to give you a prescription as well, right? So that is basically just what an expert system is. It is basically just simulating the decision making abilities of a human expert, right? It is performing the task that a human expert may be able to perform, right? So you can see that they are used in various fields such as medical diagnosis, financial planning, and technical support, etc. All right. So it also has a few characteristics, right? First of all, it has an interface, right? So the interface is basically just the stuff that we use to interact, right? So if it needs some data, the prompts that we use to type inside, and all of that is basically the buttons, and all of that is basically just the interface that the user is interacting with, right? So the interface is basically just used to input data and view output. Secondly, it has a knowledge base, right? That is basically just the collection of all the facts and rules, right? So if we're talking to an AI doctor, right, it will obviously know what types of diseases exist these days and what are more popular, and it will have all of the symptoms that are related to a certain type of disease, right? So that is basically just the knowledge base. Secondly, it will have a rule base, which is basically just the set of conditional statements that define the logic of decision making, right? So if you're talking to an AI doctor, right, if you tell them that we have a cold and we have sore throat, right, it will give us a certain type of disease, right? However, if we give him more symptoms, it will see to it that it is not the same disease as what we had when we told him that we only had two symptoms, right? So that is basically the rule base. All right, so lastly, we obviously have the inference engine, right? This is basically the component that applies the logical rules to the knowledge base, right? So this is basically what is connecting the rules base and the knowledge base. All right, so coming down to the last topic, which is machine learning. All right, so machine learning is basically a subset of AI, which is basically when AI employs learning algorithms and training data to develop models that adapt and improve over time. All right, so let's study a few of its characteristics. First of all, it is a form of artificial intelligence, obviously, right? It can edit its own data. And then third, it can be trained, right? So this can be supervised or unsupervised. All right, so supervised or unsupervised basically means that it can learn with human interaction or without human interaction, right? So over here you can see that supervised means that a user tells the system, and an unsupervised system basically means that a system is given the input and will need to work out the output by itself, right? The user will not basically tell it what to do. And then lastly, it will analyze the patterns and store the successful and unsuccessful results. Alright, so this is pretty much it for this chapter. Alright, so I hope that you like this video. Make sure to like my videos and subscribe to my channel, and I will be uploading more videos more often. Also, make sure that you share these with your other friends who are studying the same subject. Alright, I'll see you later.